Zektar arrived at his observation station to find it surrounded by senior personnel from across the galactic intelligence community. Representatives from a dozen different species clustered around the displays, their expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed terror. The observation deck, normally quiet except for routine monitoring operations, buzzed with urgent conversations in multiple languages. "What's happening?" Zektar asked Commander Thylax, who stood at the center of the chaos with an expression he had never seen before. Something that looked remarkably like dread. "The Void Hunters have breached the galactic barrier," she said simply, and every conversation in the room fell silent. Zektar felt his circulatory fluids freeze. The Void Hunters were not a military force or an alien species. They were something far worse. Entities that existed in the space between stars, feeding on the life force of entire worlds. They had been dormant beyond the galaxy's edge for millions of years, held back by ancient barriers that no living species remembered how to construct or maintain. "How many?" he asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Initial estimates suggest a swarm large enough to consume every inhabited world in 3 sectors, Thylax replied. "Traditional military responses have proven completely ineffective. They absorb energy weapons, ignore kinetic attacks, and seem to grow stronger with each world they devour." "Then why are we here?" Zektar asked, confusion mixing with his terror. "If conventional weapons are useless, what could we possibly observe that would be relevant?" "The humans have volunteered to engage them," came a voice from across the room. Zektar turned to see Admiral Korthax of the Hegemony Fleet, one of the most experienced military commanders in the galaxy. "They claim they have a solution." "Own Rive?" Zektar turned to see Admiral Korthax of the galaxy. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. After witnessing human capabilities in simulation and defensive warfare, Zektar had begun to respect their military abilities. But the Void Hunters were not conventional opponents. They were a force of nature, as unstoppable as gravity and as inevitable as entropy. What could any species, even humans, possibly do against such creatures? "How many ships are they sending?" asked someone from the crowd of observers. "1," Admiral Korthax replied, and the silence that followed was deafening. Zektar stared at the display as it activated, showing a view of space near the breached barrier. The Void Hunters were clearly visible as dark distortions in space itself, shadows that seemed to swallow light and matter alike. They moved in patterns that hurt to observe directly, following geometries that conventional physics couldn't explain. Each entity was roughly the size of a small moon, and there were thousands of them spreading through the galaxy like a plague. Against this nightmare fleet, humanity had sent a single vessel. The human ship appeared on sensors as it dropped out of faster-than-light travel near the swarm's leading edge. It was unlike any warship Zektar had seen in his studies of human military technology, where their previous vessels had been utilitarian and practical. This one seemed almost organic, its hull flowing in curves that suggested growth rather than construction. It was roughly the size of a standard frigate, completely insignificant compared to the cosmic horrors bearing down on inhabited space. "What are they thinking?" whispered one of the observers. A crystalline being whose species had lost 3 worlds to conventional military threats. That ship couldn't defeat a single destroyer, much less forces that have consumed entire solar systems. The human vessel's first action was to broadcast a message on all frequencies, a simple transmission that reached every observation, station, and military command post in the affected sectors. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the UES Determination. All vessels are to maintain minimum safe distance of 10 light-years from our operational area. What you are about to witness is classified under Human Military Code 77 Alpha. Observation is permitted, but any attempt to interfere will be considered an act of aggression against humanity. 10 light-years. Zektar's calculations suggested that the blast radius of whatever the humans were planning would require that kind of distance for safety. But what kind of weapon could have such range while remaining small enough to fit on a frigate-sized vessel? The answer became clear as the human ship began its approach toward the Void Hunter swarm. It wasn't carrying a weapon. It was a weapon. The first sign came when the ship's hull began changing, segments folding back to reveal interior spaces that seemed far larger than the vessel's external dimensions could accommodate. Zektar's instruments detected massive energy buildups, but not the kind associated with traditional weapons or power systems. This was something else entirely, something that his equipment couldn't properly classify. "What are the energy readings?" Admiral Korthax demanded. "Unknown," came the reply from multiple sensor operators. "The signature doesn't match any known technology. It's almost as if they're charging some kind of dimensional manipulation device." Dimensional manipulation. The words sent chills through every observer in the room. Such technology was purely theoretical, considered impossible by every species in the galaxy. The energy requirements alone would exceed the output of most stars, and the risks of catastrophic failure were beyond calculation. The Void Hunters, meanwhile, had detected the approaching human vessel and begun converging on its position. They moved with predatory intelligence, surrounding the small ship with creatures that could have swallowed entire fleets. Their dark forms pulsed with malevolent energy as they prepared to feed on this new source of life force. That's when Captain Chen made her final transmission. "For every world you've taken, for every life you've consumed, for every future you've stolen," her voice echoed across the communication networks, calm and determined despite facing cosmic-level horrors. "This is humanity's answer." The human ship exploded, not destroyed, not damaged, but deliberately detonated in a burst of energy that transformed the local area of space into something that defied description. Where conventional explosions expanded outward in predictable patterns, this eruption seemed to fold reality itself, creating distortions that pulled matter and energy into configurations that shouldn't have been possible. The effect on the Void Hunters was immediate and absolute. The creatures that had seemed immune to all conventional weapons suddenly found themselves being torn apart at a fundamental level, their exotic matter-energy constructs unable to maintain cohesion in the altered space-time around the detonation. They didn't die so much as cease to exist. Their very essence unraveled by forces that operated beyond normal physics. "What kind of weapon was that?" Zektar breathed, watching as the destruction spread through the Void Hunter swarm like a chain reaction, each entity's destruction triggering further collapses in local space-time. "It wasn't a weapon," Admiral Korthax said slowly, his voice filled with something that might have been awe or terror. "It was a sacrifice. The humans built that ship around some kind of controlled singularity device, and Captain Chen detonated it manually." The implications hit Zektar like a physical blow. The humans had deliberately sent one of their own on a suicide mission, armed with technology so dangerous that its use required the complete destruction of the operator. It was a level of commitment and sacrifice that most species couldn't comprehend, much less implement. But the true horror became apparent as the effects of the detonation continued to spread. The altered space-time wasn't just destroying the Void Hunters in the immediate area, it was creating a cascade effect that propagated through their dimensional connection points. Every entity in the swarm, regardless of location, began suffering the same fundamental breakdown. "They're all dying," someone whispered from the crowd of observers. "Every single Void Hunter in the galaxy." "How is that possible?" Zektar demanded. "The swarm extends across dozens of sectors. How could a single detonation affect entities thousands of light-years away?" The answer came from the human military advisors, who had been monitoring the operation from their command ships at safe distance. "Void Hunters exist partially outside normal space-time," came the explanation. "They're connected through what our scientists call dimensional substrates. By destabilizing those connections at a fundamental level, we created a feedback loop that propagated through their entire network." Zektar stared at the displays in growing horror as he realized what he had witnessed. The humans hadn't just defeated the Void Hunter invasion. They had committed genocide against an entire category of existence. They had reached into the structure of reality itself and used it as a weapon to eliminate a threat that conventional military force couldn't touch. "How long have you been planning this?" Admiral Korthax asked the human representatives. "Approximately 300 years, came the calm reply. "We identified the theoretical possibility of Void Hunter emergence shortly after joining the galactic community. The weapon system you just observed has been in development ever since, 300 years. Longer than most species maintained their governments. The humans had been preparing for a threat that might never materialize. They had developed technology that violated known physics, trained personnel willing to sacrifice themselves for species they had only recently met, and kept the entire project secret from the galactic community until the moment it was needed. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" asked one of the observers, a representative from a species that had lost colonies to the Void Hunters in previous incursions. "Because the knowledge would have been more dangerous than the threat," came the human reply. "The technology required to create our weapon could easily be adapted to destroy inhabited worlds or entire solar systems. We couldn't risk it falling into the wrong hands." The words hung in the air like an accusation. The humans had possessed planet-killing technology for centuries. Weapons that could eliminate entire civilizations with a single application, and they had chosen to keep it secret rather than use it as a diplomatic tool or military advantage. As the observation session concluded and the various representatives began filing their reports, Zektar found himself alone with Commander Thylax, and a growing understanding of why most species avoided military confrontations with humanity. "It's not their tactical abilities," he said slowly, organizing his thoughts. "It's not their adaptability, or their technology, or even their willingness to sacrifice themselves for others." "Then what is it?" Thylax asked, though her expression suggested she already knew the answer. "It's the fact that they think like this," Zektar replied, gesturing toward the displays that still showed the aftermath of the Void Hunter elimination. "They plan for threats that don't exist, develop weapons for scenarios that may never happen, and make preparations that span centuries. They look at the universe and see not what is, but what could be, and then they prepare to deal with it." He paused, considering the implications of his own words. Most species react to threats when they appear. Humans prepare for threats before they're even born. They turn the entire galaxy into a strategic problem to be solved, and they never stop working on the solution. "And that's why everyone keeps their distance," Thylax agreed. "Not because humans are inherently aggressive, or because they possess superior technology. It's because they approach conflict with a level of preparation and forward thinking that makes victory against them almost impossible." Zektar nodded, understanding finally crystallizing in his mind. The humans he had observed weren't just soldiers or strategists. They were a species that had weaponized the concept of preparation itself, turning their ability to plan and adapt into a force that could reshape reality when necessary. "Commander," he said slowly, "I believe I need to recommend that human military capabilities be classified at the highest possible levels." "Already done," Thylax replied grimly. "The Galactic Council has agreed that detailed knowledge of human military doctrine poses a threat to galactic stability." As Zektar compiled his final reports and prepared to submit his observations, he couldn't shake the certainty that he had witnessed something that would change the galaxy forever. Not through conquest or aggression, but through the simple knowledge that somewhere among the stars, there existed a species that could look into the void itself and find a way to fight back. The humans hadn't just defeated an ancient evil. They had demonstrated that no threat, no matter how cosmic or inevitable, was beyond their ability to plan for and overcome, and that knowledge, more than any weapon or military force, was what made them the most terrifying species in the galaxy. They weren't just fighters, they weren't just strategists, they weren't just survivors. They were a species that had looked at the universe and decided that nothing, absolutely nothing, would be allowed to threaten the continuation of life itself, and they had spent 3 centuries building the tools to enforce that decision. That, Zektar realized as he submitted his final report, was why everyone kept their distance from humans. Not because they feared human aggression, but because they feared human determination. When humanity decided that something needed to be done, no force in the universe seemed capable of stopping them. And the truly terrifying part was that they were just getting started.